Hi, I'm Tim May, and I'm moderating this series of 10 conversations on expressive photography with Phil Douglas. Phil understands the nature of expressive photography as well as anyone I know. For 35 years, he directed the Douglas Visual Workshops, and he helped more than 10,000 communications professionals make and use photographs to express ideas, tell stories, and convey meaning. Phil says he's learned a great deal from those workshop participants over the years, and he also enjoys learning from the tens of thousands of images he's made in more than 60 countries. I first met Phil at Santa Fe Workshops in 2004, and we went on to photograph together across North America, as well as in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. Both Phil and I have displayed our images on various photographic websites, and Phil has put together a 5,000 image cyberbook on expressive photography at pbase.com. You can find the link to that cyberbook in the notes below. It has drawn more than 10 million visitors since he started in 2003. They have left more than 12,000 comments under his pictures, and Phil has answered each one of them. When the pandemic brought Zoom into our lives, I asked Phil to bring that cyberbook to life in this set of 10 conversations on expressive photography, and now he has. Enjoy.
We're in module 2 of our 10 conversations on expressive photography. And today we're going to talk about incongruity, when ordinary becomes extraordinary. And this photo, which I'll talk about at length when we get into it, is typical of what happens when you find something that's at odds with normality, with the expected. And certainly there's something going on here that this man who is doing something under the hood of his car is oblivious to. He doesn't understand where he is at this moment, or perhaps he's forgotten where he is at this moment. But I know where he is at the moment, and I make this picture, which is incongruous. So let's get into it by looking at the first shot in my module. I made this in Bagan, Burma, and women smoke cigars in Burma. Old women smoke cigars in Burma. Old women smoke big fat cigars in Burma. So we have a 3 departure from the norm going on here. Usually women don't smoke cigars. And if they do, they'll smoke a normal size cigar. And in this case, an old woman, no, in this case, a woman is smoking a very large cigar. And we can even go to another level where it's an old woman smoking a very large cigar. So the more you depart from the norm in a picture, the stronger the incongruous relationship becomes.
Right. And I'm interested in the fact that your definition of norm is something that is interesting in that in Burma or Myanmar, this is the norm. But from our culture and our perspective, the incongruity exists.
That's right.
And it's a wonderful picture.
And of course, the curling smoke.
Right. And the matching color of her hair.
Yes. Yes,
wow.
The hair and the, I can show you here, the hair and the smoke.
Right.
I made this on the battlefield of Waterloo, and an old building that was present at the time of the battle in 1815. Still there, but today it's a souvenir shop. And they have plunked a full-size I say life-size bust of Napoleon in the window of this souvenir shop. And you can also see very dimly some racks of postcards behind him. But I made the photograph because of the reflection in the glass window. You have clouds, and Napoleon seems to be looking down from heaven within the confines of this souvenir shop on the battlefield at Waterloo. Now, of course, this requires context, and context plays a role in all incongruity. As Tim pointed out, like Tim pointed out in the previous image, you have to really understand the difference between our cultural norm and the Myanmar cultural norm to appreciate the presence of that cigar in that woman's mouth. And in this case, you have to know something about history, that there was a battle called Waterloo, that Napoleon met his Waterloo at Waterloo, that what Napoleon looks like or who he is and where he is. He's inside of a window here, looking out, and yet he seems to be in heaven, more or less, a symbolic heaven, because of the clouds. So your context for the picture will create the relationship or the difference from the norm in this picture. This is called a scale incongruity. This is a piece of very large piece of sculpture by the artist Claes Oldenburg, and it's in front of the public library in Denver, Colorado. It's a commonplace act, sweeping up debris. So Oldenburg's work of art is incongruous in its own way. I mean, the brush and the scooper, whatever you call these things. Tim?
Dustpan and
Dustpan, yes.
And broom.
A dustpan and a broom. And the junk that is sweeping up are giant hunks of sheet metal that resemble little pieces of paper. And of course, that's the work of art as Oldenburg created it. It's huge. It is huge because, and you can see how big it is in comparison to the group of people that are walking towards it. And then when you place the huge structure of which you can only see a tiny part of it, so you know how big this library is in Denver, the facade of it. And it's amazing how these people don't even seem to be concerned. They're not, they should be in awe, but they're just walking past it. And so we have all of these things in the image that differ from the norm. It's incongruous. It has my 3 favorite colors in it too, red, yellow, and blue. Always draw the eye. Tim,
well, it also gives an example of how to photograph somebody else's art. And in this case, 2 people, the architect and the sculptor.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you have people walking by in tank tops.
Right. Yep.
You and I were taking a ferry from the state of Washington to British Columbia to Victoria, and we're waiting for it to load. And as we sat there in this long line of cars, a raccoon came marching down the yellow line. And we were stunned. I was stunned. Jumped out there and made the photograph. And it's plodding along. It's the yellow line is essential to this picture because it shows where it has come from and yet where it has to go. And it isn't even looking at the yellow line. It's like he knows or it knows it's there. And the truncated man here might be looking at the raccoon, but again, you can't see if he is or not. So he's a bystander. These people in the back, they're softly focused and they don't even see it. So the focal point is on the whiskers of the raccoon as he approaches, and the textures of the road, and the bristly coat, and the kind of rough texture that man made in this road. But what's happening here really is we have a raccoon is getting on a ferry boat to go somewhere. And again, this is not normal.
Right.
Outside the norm. This is the picture that we began with, and I would like to mention a few more things about it that make it incongruous. A mural has been painted on the wall, a very cheerful, incongruous mural. I mean, you have a outsize mouth detached from its owner, and the mouth is smiling, huge. But within this mouth are teeth and bricks and an air conditioning vent and a light.
Right.
And then it bursts out into a red, white, and blue motif. This was made in Toronto, so I don't think it represents the American flag. I think they're just playing with the red and blue and white colors here. His car is red, the mural is red. He is intent on working. He doesn't even care about where his car happened to be parked. He's simply doing what he came to do. There are two bicycles in the picture attached to posts here, and they are not being used at the time. And they are innocent bystanders to this very bizarre situation.
And I really like the fact that it almost appears as if the blue is vapor, and he's holding a spray can to.
Oh yes, a blue spray can.
Right. To take that vapor or liquid and squirt it at the engine. It's a great photo.
And you also notice that I only photographed half the mouth, and that you don't usually see a mouth bisected like that. You usually see a mouth portrayed as a mouth, not a half a mouth. And that's an act of incongruity in my cropping.
Well, and also the two open mouths. There's the smile mouth and the open mouth of the car.
Yes. The lid of the engine.
The hood, yes.
The hood is up. And
right.
So I never noticed that. Wow. The more you look at pictures, the more you see.
Right. Ah!
We were in a little town in Utah, remember?
I think it may have been Oregon. It's Oregon. Look at the license plate.
Oregon, yes. It wasn't Utah. This was a parking lot, and there was a mural there, and it was a World War II commemorative mural about a squadron of bombers that made a big raid in the European theater in World War II. And you have normal cars parked in parking lots. And again, by my act of cropping, it looks like this plane is going to crash into this car. And it's an impossibility, of course, but that's the impression you get from the photograph. It's a humorous juxtaposition of a heroic and possibly tragic event and an empty car about to be demolished. This was made in Normandy, and it's the ruins of the German fortifications in what Hitler called his West Wall, and this area was heavily bombed and then shelled by Navy ships. And then finally, the troops fought their way ashore, and they were still receiving heavy fire from the ruins of these bunkers from the survivors. And today, the bunkers are left there. The remains of the bunkers are left there for visitors to walk past on a path. And I waited until we had a pair of visitors here and a pair of visitors here. What is incongruous about this image is the fact that these people don't seem to be aware of where they are. Of course they are aware, but in the photograph, at this moment, they're looking away. We are confronted with massive ruin, and these people are strolling by it as if it wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the basic incongruity in this image. You and I were in the Sultan's Palace in Istanbul. And these people, these were tourists taking a break. Every time I look at this, I have to laugh.
Right.
Because of the outsize of the bench that they're sitting on. This bench is made for giants. After all, this was the Sultan's Palace. He had big people who barely use these benches. These are normal size to small people. Their expressions, the fact that the feet are off the ground, and they are not aware of the incongruity that
Right.
I was aware of, and that now you are aware of, as we look at this image.
Yeah, I think my immediate response was yours. It was chuckle.
Yeah.
I like the way that she is a study in textures with her skirt, her purse, and the wall above her has the arch over her head with more texture above her. It is a mini frame for the whole of her.
And in incongruous contrast to the man she's with,
Right.
he's a study in simplicity compared
Right.
to her.
Right, to her.
This was a bench I photographed in a small a community up in Vermont. It's a jeweler, and they've had an artist create figures of people resting on a bench, and they've attached wooden projections of their ankles and their feet. And so it really looks like the two people dozing on a bench. And I photographed it alone with flowers hanging down and the window of the jeweler. And it's a scene that you would never expect to see. It's whimsical. It is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
It is funny. And the colors, again, the red, the blues, the greens, are very striking. And of course, they pick up on the color that the blossoms of the flowers bring to the image. Tim, anything to add to this?
Not particularly. It would have been interesting to have one person sitting on the bench, but
But there was no one there.
Right.
It would have been interesting. That brings up a point. When we're looking for incongruous things have to be arranged in a way to make it possible. I mean, that man fixing his car, if he wasn't there, we have just had the mural to work with, which would have been incongruous in a way, but not as incongruous as it was when he was in the picture. And, it would have been nice if we had someone snoozing on that bench, but there was no one else in that. I made this picture on a cruise ship as we departed the harbor of Punta Arenas at the tip of Chile for Antarctica. And here's a tourist. She was a lady from Australia, and she was on deck every day, filming every departure, every arrival. And of course, the ship has a tremendous tailwind, and her long hair is blowing straight out. And again, she is taking it for granted. But
Right.
it becomes for me part of a picture that is all about an oncoming storm.
Right.
The sky is leaden, and you know when the storms blow at the tip of the world down there, they are very, very windy storms. And this is the oncoming gale that is blowing her hair out. But she is intent on filming the departure from the town of Punta Arenas. And I made it black and white because I wanted to simplify everything to emphasize that hair against the clouds. It was perfect, perfect.
Yeah, and the lines are great too, of the white in the clouds going right to the dark to the her hair, that arch up of the line.
Yep.
Cool.
I was photographing surfers in Mission Beach, California. And I was out on the pier, and this fellow has just wiped out. And it's the hand gesture, the universal hand gesture of goodbye that makes this picture humorous. It's an incongruous thing to be waving goodbye from the heart of a wave.
Right.
And it's that moment. It's a fraction of a second. Needless to say, he's not waving goodbye. He's just playing his out, trying to keep his balance, which is
Right.
impossible. And he's going to take a dive. But the beauty of this image is that what you don't see and what you think about him. Of course, you can't see him. You only see his shoulder, his arm, and most of all, his hand, pleading for either help me or bye.
And for me,
Yeah.
again, one of the things I'm seeing here a lot, because for me, incongruity has been one of the most elusive aspects of what you talk about. For me, there's a couple of things that my information says, that incongruity is subjective for a major part of the taking. Every picture is subjective, but he hasn't started to wipe out yet. From my perspective, his board is still, and
Right.
that's part of the way to save balance. That bending over in the wave is a piece of surfing. So what I'm seeing is balance, not goodbye. But again, it's still a fascinating picture, and incongruous from my perspective also in different ways.
And what makes me, the more I look at this image, the more I see how the organization of the picture, the composition of the picture, and we'll be talking about composition in another module, but again, I did not compose this picture consciously. I was getting a moment in time.
Right.
But my frame and nature did something that made this really work. You can see the spray here, begins down here and works its way up and actually follows the line of his arm. And
Right.
just under the hand, there's an explosion of spray, and then it continues out and carries you out until it explodes out here. So it carries you through the entire image.
Right. And I get in that mystical place, but for me, the angularity of the board and the angle of the spray below the board moving up into curve, and it's like he's cutting across the curve of the ocean.
Yes, yes. And there's a playful note to the colors on his board
Right.
are whimsical and playful, and this is almost tragic.
Right.
Is firstly the end of his wonderful run here, and uh, uh, it's an image that you might say I was lucky to get, but I would say, as I always do, that luck is the residue of design. I stood on that pier for almost an hour photographing surfers as they struggled to maintain their balance as they passed me. I was able to get used to the rhythm of the waves, how they work, and time the approach of the wave as it enters my frame, time and time again. And I used also the motor drive in the camera to make multiple exposures whenever I pressed down the button. So I would have 20 or 30 pictures. It's a tremendous editing job later, but I
Right.
would have, 20 or 30 pictures of each picture so that I could get the moment that would work the best for my particular idea. And when you are dealing with a sport like this, you learn the sport as best you can, learn about the sport as best you can. That will enhance your result, the more knowledge you have. Now, this lady wasn't going anywhere. This was comparatively easy. It was a window display in Vancouver. And it was very, very nice, very simply done, but very, very beautiful. And the mannequin in the window is showing off a brilliant red dress. But I decided to do this in black and white, which really simplifies the image and makes the fact that it's a headless mannequin. This picture is about a headless mannequin instead of a red dress.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the abstraction does here for me. The incongruity comes in the fact that there's no head there.
Well, and
Design,
she's surrounded by nature also.
exactly, and the leaves are just beautiful, and they weren't a part of the window display. The leaves were outside. She
Well,
was
it's a
inside.
reflection of the tree behind her.
You can see the tree reflected in the window.
Right.
The shadows. And so the fact that she's become a part of nature, and she also has no head, and she has a beautiful dress, and she's kind of showing it off there with her hands, the folds in the dress, the fingers, and they're just in the right place. And it comes as a humorous shock to see that she has no head. One might now start to wonder, does a picture have to be humorous to be incongruous? Incongruity is a very important aspect of all humor. If you think about funny things, there's always something that's a little bit off that makes it funny. Not just photos, but a joke, a skit,
Right.
pun, language. And so, but incongruity also works when it's not funny, as in the picture in D-Day. The Normandy picture was a great human conflict that cost tens of thousands of lives. And so there's nothing to laugh about in that picture, but it is still incongruous. And that's the end of this thing. Tim, do you have anything to add to this module on incongruity?
I was speaking to one of our mutual friends about this process and talking about incongruity, and she continues to kind of, I need to say, it's not juxtaposition, it's incongruity. But I think juxtaposition is a piece of incongruity,
Yes.
but I don't think they're the same thing.
No.